Crisis Radio. And we are recording here in Washington, D.C. It's the afternoon of the 8th of July, 2016. This is the day after the Dallas killings. And what we can see very plainly is that my forecasts of a strategy of tension masterminded by people in the intelligence community at home and quite possibly abroad, looking across towards a certain fog-shrouded city. They also may have a role. But in particular, the U.S. intelligence community has continued now its strategy of tension designed to create a climate where even such a monstrosity as Trump, such a scoundrel, an adventurer, could seize the White House. And as you can see, that's probably the only way he can seize the White House. So there's a group of people operating behind the scenes who seem determined to do everything possible to put Trump into power. And we see that without these outside events, the fascist billionaire flails. He has no idea what to do. It's of course open to question whether he will be able to get full benefit out of this particular terror event because of his psychotic, mentally ill outlook and also because of his political ineptitude. So here we are, 10 days before the Republican National Convention, and the news is full of how nobody wants to speak there. People are turning down the vice presidency left and right. Trump has no money except what he's been given for him, what he's contributed himself. Because remember, the campaign money is hard money. You got to raise that within the rules. I suspect Sheldon Adelson has been funneling money. Maybe he wants Newt the Toot, to be the vice presidential candidate. But that's all going on. So we have a Trump campaign with a high personnel turnover, total disarray. But now that was all yesterday, and Trump had proven pathetically incapable of even exploiting such golden opportunities as the report from FBI boss Comey on the Hillary Clinton emails, and that was then followed by the Loretta Lynch speech exonerating Mrs. Clinton. Trump had cluttered that all up with his Star of David on his fundraising message. And he's obsessed, stubbornly obsessed, pathologically obsessed. He's got to go back to it again and again and again. And he's killing himself with this stuff. But now another outside event has happened in the framework of the strategy of tension. And Trump was obviously told, shut your mouth, so that he now comes out today, that is to say Friday, the 8th of July, Trump is now very contained. It's an attack on our country. We must restore law and order. Now, those advisors around him are all from the Nixon years. That's Roger Stone, Paul Manafort in particular. This is the CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President. And the top creeps like Manafort, that's where they come from. They attack Hillary Clinton because she's been there for 25 years. They've been there for 40 years doing dirty tricks. Donald Segretti, the movie was on last night on cable TV. Donald Segretti. That's the ultimate matrix of what these people do. The Torturers Lobby law firm. So now Trump is trying to sound statesmanlike. Now I'll give him another 48 hours at most, and he'll be back. The dog will return to its vomit. So let's take a look at this now. The conceptual framework, first of all, because this is always the most important. This is a strategy of tension. It has been articulated through a number of phases, and eventually the phases are going to go parallel, and I think they're likely to converge. But we've seen a number of events, right? We had San Bernardino, California last year. We've had the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting just a month ago, barely that. And now we have Dallas in July. Okay, so the rhythm is increasing. This is a strategy of tension. I have been telling you this for months. We can even see where it's headed. Remember, this is something I tell you. It has been mentioned by the comedian Bill Maher, by the New York Times writer Thomas Friedman on Meet the Press, by Charlie Rose, by Brian Lehrer of WNYC New York, right? When we have a couple of others too. Friedman has been detailed comparing this to the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in Israel and how Netanyahu then was able to dominate the field. What we seem to have now is the beginning of two things. I see two phases at the same time. The one is the pre-convention prelude of the Republican National Convention, which meets, again, it starts officially on the 18th of July in Cleveland. But, of course, the Platform Committee, the Credentials Committee, the Rules Committee are going to be meeting already next week. They may already be meeting to do various things. So they're now under the cloud of this kind of stuff. It's evident in this kind of stagnant economy, and we're getting reports that the U.S. economy is about, these are obviously interested reports, but there's also a basis. The U.S. economy is going to flip into recession. Again, this would, of course, be the end of whatever, crawling recovery, agonizingly slow recovery we've had under Obama. That will then flip into negative. Let's see if it's too late for Trump on that front. But what we've got is the pre-convention prelude, and let's see, just on this, right, on the atmospherics before we get to the actual terrorism. ConservativeHQ.com, touted by Limbaugh today, says that the Democratic National Committee is going to spend $800,000 to disrupt the Republican National Convention. And then you look, who is this? And the answer is Viguerie, Richard Viguerie, the direct mail king, the reactionary Republican from Virginia. More piggery from Viguerie is predicting big destabilization at the Democratic National Convention. There's also then the long, hot summer. In other words, riots in the cities, right? Inner city, black, other Hispanic riots, maybe white vigilantes responding. And that is the long, hot summer, right? That we had in things like the Detroit riot, the Watts riot, and how that fed into the problems of 1968 and the beginning of the Republican Southern strategy with Nixon. Nixon, again, the matrix of the Obama, sorry, not Obama, but the Trump team. Remember, we've got that September 9th prison strike, right? The Attica anniversary, and whatever those demands are, I think you can see the immense potential for manipulation. A creeping coup and an October surprise. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So, it is a strategy of tension. That's a NATO technical term. Classic example, Italy, 1969. Break a strike wave, install God knows what kind of government, but break the strike wave, hold back the Communist Party and the Socialist Party, and rack up what was for then a tremendous number of dead, 12 or so, in the agricultural bank in Milan in December 1969. So that's the framework. We're now in a pre-convention phase, strategy of tension there. You can see the desire is to accredit this idea of race war, white against black. And we say no to race war, yes to class conflict, because that's where it's decided. So rejecting the cultural populism of race and ethno-cultural issues, we demand a stress on mass traction economic issues. So we've got the long, hot summer, and some of that is going to be spontaneous, but it can always be hyped. And the goal then is a creeping coup, that institutions can be taken over, right, as Obama departs, right? Obama seems to be somewhat absent already. And then the crescendo, sometime in September or October, most likely, which I would call then an October surprise. And watch out for that September 9th prison strike, because that can feed into this beautifully. And I'm sure there are other things, including financial events. Maybe our dear British and Chinese friends are going to hit us with a financial crisis, because they know the United States under Trump is not just a pathetic, dumb giant, but a pathetic, psychotic, raving, babbling giant that nobody in the world will want to touch. Nobody, few in the world will want to touch with a 10-foot pole. So the line, of course, is this. Trump, we just heard, an attack on our country. We must restore law and order. Law and order, Nixon's code for racism. Crime in the streets is another one, Nixon's code for racism. But when Nixon said law and order, Strom Thurmond said, oh, racism. Okay, Ben Carson, a Trump heavyweight, also sort of borderline disturbed himself. He says there are terror cells and agitators all over, and they are waiting to strike. Viguerie, we just heard from, that it's the Democratic National Committee paying money for these events in Cleveland starting 10 days from now. Oh, and the classic, right? There's one guy, you can see, this is the danger of the Trump coalition. Trump was told to shut up, and apparently he did, right, so far. Again, I'll give him 48 hours. But there's this other guy, Joe Walsh. He is a former member of the House of Representatives. So he's a Republican Party stalwart of some note. He says, this is Joe Walsh, okay? Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh says, this is war. Joe Walsh continues, watch out Obama. Joe Walsh says, watch out Black Lives Matter punks. And Joe Walsh says, real America is coming after you, okay? The flagship of the Trump media cartel, which of course includes Breitbart, World Nut Daily, various assorted libertarians, National Enquirer, and so forth. Drudge, however, set the tone already last night. His line was, Black lives kill, okay? So you're going to take that at face value and build an analysis on that. That is just pathetic. And some of these people I know went through the 9/11 era. They have learned nothing. They're so corrupt or stupid, they just can't imagine taking a principled position on this. How about this? The New York Post, already last night, civil war. Who else talks about civil war? Oh, it's the Trump media backer, Michael Savage. We should have mentioned him in that media cartel. So it's ugly, but you get the idea. Race war. Libertarians today. We're now beginning race war headed towards civil war. this is actually funny because some of these people have gone, they were so obsessed with the Transportation Safety Administration wanting them to take their shoes off, right, that they exploded. But now you see a lot of people are very happy to really welcome a police state, as long as it's Trump's racist, psychotic police state. Some of these people are in a Schwärmerei, right? In other words, a myriad kaleidoscope of fragments of thoughts and emotions. How about this? Cui bono? Cui prodest? Who benefits? Tell me who benefits. I've seen people now, they're spewing out references to a million different things around the world. Tell me one little thing here. Either you think this is spontaneous, which nobody can, and nobody with a brain is going to say this is spontaneous. This is orchestrated. And you could even hear that on MSNBC or one of the cable shows. It's orchestrated. So it's orchestrated. Why is it orchestrated? Who benefits? Okay? We're told Soros did it. Oh, Soros has given $30 million for all kinds of left-wing groups. Yeah, he's an oligarch. He needs plebeian, lumpen proletarian shock troops. Tell me this. Soros, if things remain calm, Soros obviously or putatively backing Mrs. Clinton. If Soros does nothing, he probably gets a significant control of the U.S. from the top down through Hillary Clinton, right? He'll be welcome in that White House for sure. Why would Soros destabilize the U.S. in a way that might give the benefit, the advantage to Trump? Because that's obviously who gets the advantage. The cui bono, cui prodest is Trump. He benefits. Now, this doesn't mean he did it. It doesn't mean he did it. I wrote a whole book saying 9/11 is not what you were told, but it was done by networks inside the government, a rogue network, an invisible government, a secret government, a deep state, a parallel government. All these things apply. Bush, you wouldn't tell Bush about this in a million years, and not even Cheney. It's ridiculous. Those people are simply walk-on parts. So, obviously, nobody in his right mind would tell Trump anything because he's a psychotic. He'll blab it. You wouldn't even tell him. He's got to be kept in the dark. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we got every reactionary is hyping this. By the way, according to one broadcast report, the Black Power political organization has claimed responsibility. I get the impression that the stuff with ISIS was not getting enough traction. So the powers behind this, in other words, those intelligence factions we've been talking about, rogue network, right? Rogue network seeking to help a rogue. They have decided to switch over to this race war. Also because you have the pre-existing long hot summer, right, which is not created by this, but which can be immensely energized. And it's, of course, this all a tragedy. And by the way, we condemn terrorism, all kinds. We're here to fight terrorism. That may be different than some, right? We're not in favor of terrorism. We're against it. And obviously the pro-Trump terrorism is more dangerous because you have a clear path to seize power. Think about Hitler and the Reichstag fire, right? He had been more or less legally elected chancellor, not quite, which means not at all. But it was the Reichstag fire in February, March of 1933 that actually gave him the pretext to declare dictatorship. So you have to look at that. And of course, the Trump polls are bad. And the state-by-state situation for Trump is quite alarming and dismal. So we should also realize we're in a highly charged field, right? This Brexit, as we've been telling you, right? This 2% majority vote to get Great Britain out of the European Union under these various pretexts. This is done by the City of London. That is a coup d'etat. That is a putsch. That is a golpe. That's the Brexit. So now, since in the United Kingdom we've had a coup, we can look at a coup here in the U.S., which is strategy of tension, long hot summer, creeping coup, October surprise, and voila, you've got a new catastrophic presidency going on, which would have, again, most people would have considered this unbelievable a year and a half ago. So we've heard from the various babblers. Again, the question you should always ask, cui bono, cui prodest. And the other part of it is, my methodology is authoritative, and you should use it. So we have now a patsy, Micah Xavier Johnson. It's actually funny, when they first announced the name, they called this guy Micah X Johnson. So they want to make you think he's a black Muslim, right? That he's like Malcolm X and so forth. No, that's Xavier. That's St. Francis Xavier, one of the top guys of the Jesuits, right? One of the people with St. Ignatius of Loyola. He's San Francesco Saverio. That's him. So Micah Xavier Johnson, not Micah X. He's supposedly an Army reservist. And, of course, what does he say? It's perfect. It couldn't have been scripted better. He's upset about Black Lives Matter. Okay, he's upset about police killing black detainees, I guess, maybe especially unarmed black detainees. He says he hates white people, he wants to kill white people, and he wants, above all, to kill white policemen. White cops have to be killed, says the patsy, Francesco Saverio, Micah Xavier Johnson. All right, he's the patsy, and of course he has to be killed. That's that's been the rule now for a couple of years, is that they can't let these people survive. Moles, well, I would look at the Dallas Police Department, and I would say, you were rotten in 1963, and you are rotten today. And that would have been in 1963. We know it was this guy Cable. He was the brother of a top CIA official who had been treated roughly by John F. Kennedy. So rotten in 1963. And rotten today, for me, is based on repeating this stuff, first of all. And then the question of the multiple shooters, right? So again, we're going with cui bono, cui prodest. We're going with the patsy. Who is the patsy? We know. Who's a mole? Well, it looks like the police chief is a mole. And then you've got technicians. Who might they be? Well, at the beginning last night, what was it, 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., we were told that there were multiple shooters for sure, repeating the pattern of Orlando, repeating the pattern of Major Hassan. Oh, I can't even list all of the ones where there's a second or third shooter who is the Sandy Hook, Connecticut, the poor little children. There was a second shooter. These disappear, right? Breivik in Norway, disappear. The second shooter disappears from the narrative. It's one of the giveaways for the whole thing. So at the beginning, we were told that there are multiple shooters. Not only are there multiple shooters, but that they're acting in a coordinated, orchestrated, and rather effective way for terrorists, that they were carrying out triangulation, right? In other words, they were getting groups of police where they'd be getting shot at from 3 directions. We were told practically that the shooters in Dallas were creating fields of fire, and that they were creating a kill zone. So they, by the way, the shooter, according to this police chief, the police chief says the shooter, the perpetrator, the alleged purported perpetrator, he said, watch out for the IEDs. I put IEDs all over town. So what the impression you got last night, if you were watching this live, was that there was an actual military team, a combat team attacking Dallas with gunfire and with possible bombs. Now, the bombs, no bombs that I know of have gone off, although they may be. There may well be bombs stored in different places. The multiple shooters, if there were such, and all the reports said there were, those would be the technicians. Those would be the marksmen who could carry this stuff out. So the patsies, the moles, and the technicians, the complicity of the media, we know. But above all, keep that cui bono in mind. I've heard people on various media today argue that the cui bono is that Hillary Clinton wants to push the story of her emails off the front page, and therefore she ordered this to happen. Now, that is just so stupid. That is for cretins. I can't imagine, you can't show your face in public for quite a few years if you go spouting that kind of absolute nonsense. Oh, and then we're told that Loretta Lynch wants to take over all the police departments. I'm sorry. This is way above Loretta Lynch's pay grade, and she'll soon be gone. So this makes absolutely no sense. Now, the Dallas Police Department, which they've got a wonderful reputation. I don't see how. They were supposed to be such great people because they had wonderful community relations. Now, this then goes to the occasion for this was there was a demonstration in Dallas as well as in many other American cities protesting the excessive use of force and police brutality in Louisiana and in Minnesota in the previous days. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Crisis Radio. And again, one of the maxims we live by here is cui prodest, cui bono. One of these is from a drama by the distinguished Roman playwright Seneca, the tutor of Nero, taught Nero everything he knew. But his line was, cui prodest scelos is fecit. Whoever benefits from the crime is the one who committed it. Let's go easy on that. Whoever benefits from the crime is the prime suspect, right? We have due process, so we can't be quite as categorical as Seneca was in the time of Nero. But you get the idea. Trump had spent the week praising Saddam Hussein. And actually praising Saddam Hussein, where poor Bob Corker was sitting with a pained look in the corner of the stage. Corker built his whole career practically on hating and destroying Saddam Hussein. Trump had been defending his use of the Star of David on a pile of dollars, indicating the people behind Hillary Clinton, some say. He had gotten that Jewish star, I guess, or Star of David from an alternate right, racist, white supremacist, neo-Nazi source. Trump had gone to the Senate to try to mend fences. The New York Times described him as shouting hoarsely and in a manic mood. He's got depressive, obsessive compulsive syndrome. He's got so many mental. I hope we'll have some time to a little comic relief with some of the stuff about Trump that's come out in a recent biography. But so he goes there, and Trump then gets into a fight with Ben Sasse of Nebraska, Floyd Flake of Arizona, and poor Mark Kirk of Illinois. So Trump gets into a fight. And my tweet was, look, he is close to a nervous breakdown, okay? Trump is close to a nervous breakdown. And we're demanding his tax returns I actually think of equal or greater value when you think about the presidency. We want his health records and we want his mental health records. Trump has said that he has obsessive compulsive syndrome, a mild case, of course, but an obsessive compulsive syndrome. Hey, Trump, the only way you could have gotten that diagnosis is from a shrink. So we want to see the full record of your treatment by a psychiatrist, psychologist, psychoanalyst, or any other kind of mental health professional, or any other kind of mental health amateur, if it comes to that. Anybody with your mental health side, we have a right to know, because otherwise your finger is going to be on the nuclear button. I actually figured out Trump's hands. The palm of his hand is bigger and the fingers are shorter compared to the average person. So if you measure the whole thing, it seems to be of normal dimensions. But then you got to realize that the palm part is bigger and the fingers are shorter. So I think the original attack was that he had short fingers. All right. So Trump, erratic, psychotic, off message. We want those records, right? And you can see, obviously, they've obviously got him muzzled, right? He's being held incommunicado, and maybe they took away his Twitter machine. So once again, cui bono, cui prodest. And you got to tell me why Soros. I don't put anything past Soros, but why would he destabilize the U.S. and help his own enemy, right? Presumably, right? Although they've also got ties, right? They've helped each other financially. What is the point of destabilizing Hillary Clinton, who was likely to give Soros quite a bit of what he wants? So riddle me that, huh? Tell me how that's supposed to work, and don't tell me it's all Loretta Lynch, right? These politicians are, scarcely concealed puppets. So all of this then had happened as a result of the killing of a black male in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, and then in Minnesota. Now, I am stressing here the actual causality. In other words, poverty, depression, unemployment, they do not by themselves produce terrorism. The sociological phenomenon, or purely sociological, purely spontaneous genesis of terrorism, is untenable. But the situation of poverty, despair, resentment, and so forth makes it possible for intelligence agencies to recruit people and then put them into action. See, there's that extra step. It's not a linear progression from despair, poverty, resentment, hatred to terrorism. No, there's got to be an organized force in there, and it's usually an intelligence agency. Sometimes not, but at least in this country lately, that's the way it has been. So that's the question. Now, in terms of trying to touch the causes of these other cases, let me just say a couple of words about this. Black Lives Matter. Now, this group is much reviled. This group, of course, is funded by Soros, right? We may remember that the Black Lives Matter people were given actual stipends, or promised stipends by Soros in Ferguson, Missouri, 2 years ago. However, this is not always the entire story, right? But certainly Soros present at the creation and with a lot of influence. The only problem with Soros's influence is that he, at various points, welched on his debts, as far as we can see. He refused to pay. And there was even a demonstration. There was a website that said, cut the check, which was a demand from more or less these Black Lives Matter people, or from that milieu, to Soros, saying you should cough up, right? Pay us. So obviously this is extremely problematic, to put it mildly. So we're not here to defend Soros. We don't defend Black Lives Matter, but we think that the leading edge, the spearhead of the coup, golpe, putsch, is elsewhere. It's the people who would like to see Trump in the White House, and then they could implement their plan. So I would look at it that way. And how we look at it, tax Wall Street Party, we say Black Lives Matter. Yes, as a proposition, right? Not to the organization, but the thing we would add is Black jobs matter. Black jobs matter. Because that situation of despair, unemployment, resentment, hatred, social breakdown, family breakdown, that is deeply rooted in poverty. And it doesn't create terrorism directly, but it creates the usual situation: the long hot summer, unemployed, inner city people, and the cops are there, and clashes are inevitable. I think people ought to recall that there's a class dimension here, right? The focus on the racial dimension is sometimes so obsessive because that is the way that the U.S. has been. The counterinsurgency programs have all been based on race, or a lot of them have been, in the past 40, 50 years. The class dimension, right? The police do many things, right? A lot of what the police do is laudatory, but they're also there defending a property order and a social hierarchy which are unjust and oppressive. And we'll be back in a minute. To our second hour of World Crisis Radio. Here we are on Friday, the 8th of July, 2016. So, once again, the terrorism part, the mass shootings, the killings, this part implies the apparatus of patsies, moles, technicians, media complicity, and the way you look through that is cui bono, cui prodest. But when you look at the situation which creates this terrible plague of constant tension between police and impoverished communities, be they Black, Latino, white, whatever, Asian, that kind of tension, and then the deaths that grow out of that, obviously, with the excessive use of force by police, prison industrial complex, the mass incarceration of Black males in particular. This now is a matter of macroeconomics, frankly. So what are you dealing with here? Start thinking in terms of class as well as race. At least hold out something for the class analysis. The police are defending, they're forced to defend. They defend a property order which is unjust. Trump is a billionaire, an icon is a billionaire, and you're not. That has nothing to do with any talent, and the people are being rewarded for predatory looting activities. So there's an unjust property order, and there's an unjust social hierarchy, right? This is the kind of thing which 19th century revolutionaries, right, Marx among them, pointed out as one of the Achilles heels of bourgeois society. The tax Wall Street Party would say, if you're dealing with this problem, you've obviously got to have federal legislation that restrains the police. The police have got to be warned that this is unacceptable conduct, and the conduct has got to essentially cease. But at the same time, if that's all you do, that's pretty pathetic. I mean, that would be a big step. And by the way, you won't ever get that unless the Republican Party is destroyed. So don't kid yourself. As long as there's a Republican Party, there will not be federal legislation which permits the Department of Justice and the federal government to oversee the violent excesses of local police, right? Many of whom are racist. Although, it's still a minority, but it's an intolerable situation. But this by itself won't really treat the causes. And the causes can be treated as the Tax Wall Street Party recommends. The United States labor market requires an infusion of 30 million high-paid industrial, infrastructural, scientific research, aeronautics, pharmaceuticals, Silicon Valley, computers, cybernetics, and those have to be financed through credit coming from the Federal Reserve. 0%, multi-decade credit. In the case of infrastructure, 100 years is quite possible. It can be more than 100 years. It can be as long as you think the useful life of the thing you're building is. So 30 million new productive jobs at union wages. These are permanent. These, they presuppose maybe some skills, and because of that, this is coming again. The 30 million are financed by compelling, by legislation, or by the fact that the Federal Reserve has been seized. Instead of just serving bankers, right, of the bankers, by the bankers, for the bankers. No more of that. We want 30 million new productive jobs. Let's start with a $5 trillion, 5 trillion with a T, tranche, which is going to be used at a special infrastructure window in particular to buy federal agency bonds, state bonds, local government bonds, county, city, port authority, whatever. Those bonds bought by the Fed. Divest derivatives. They are rotten. They are toxic. They're a menace. We don't want them. And put your money into these solid infrastructure collateral sorts of bonds. But because of this other problem, right, that some people have been out of the workforce for a long time or never been in it, we're also going to need minimum 10 million new jobs as a Marshall Plan for the cities and for rural America. So if you're thinking black inner city and white Appalachia and rural, yes, that's the idea. For a total of 40 million new jobs. With that, you would, I think, bring the United States to something like full employment. Now, the 30 million is financed by the Fed. The 10 million, these are WPA, PWA jobs. They can be financed by the United States Treasury using tax revenues. What kind of tax revenues? Well, the best kind, revenues from a Wall Street sales tax, 1% on all transactions, including derivatives, stocks, bonds, derivatives, REITs. All of those instruments get taxed at 1%. In the case of the derivatives, it's the notional value, the value of the underlying asset being pledged. And with that, you get 10 million jobs, which are, again, sort of entry level, or, again, this is the Marion Barry program, right? The great mayor of Washington, D.C., who made sure that every kid could get a summer job. And he would go around and strong arm the Washington Post and these other companies saying, thank you so much for pledging these jobs. Now here's the list of people you're going to hire. And you can hear Catherine Meyer Graham sputtering in rage, even from her place in the underworld. So that's it. Fight for 40. Fight for 40 million new productive jobs. One of the things I would say just politically about Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, they do not have economic demands, and they behave as if an economic demand is a sellout. Now, why do they do that? They say racism is the issue. You get rid of racism. I'm sorry, you get rid of racism, you'd still have plenty of tensions just based on class tensions, because the black ghetto is so poor, and the people living on cocaine in penthouses, they're so rich. And in particular, Freddie Gray in Baltimore. Okay, West Baltimore. Remember this. What was the unemployment rate last year when Freddie Gray got killed? It was above 50%, above 50%. Now tell me, how in God's name can you have tranquil police community relations with a property order and a hierarchy, a social hierarchy, that condemns such a community to ultra depression, beyond depression. Depression is already 35%, right? At least in the American and German experiences of the 1930s. In this case, it's simply impossible with unemployment above 52%. It's just out of this world. Now, where does this thinking come from? That's the other thing. This is counterinsurgency thinking. Where does it come from? Today on National Public Radio, we heard one of the participants in the domestic hour said we need a new Kerner commission. Kerner was the governor of Illinois in the early 70s, as I recall. And Kerner, I think he got put in the slammer for corruption, but that's another story. Otto Kerner of Illinois, governor of Illinois, did a report on the riots, right, of Watts, of Detroit, of Newark, and so forth. And his conclusion, the conclusion of this distinguished Blue Ribbon Board was the cause of the riots had been white racism. No, I'm sorry. That is not enough as the cause. Maybe a cause, but the cause is something else. We'll be back in a minute. Back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So the Kerner Commission report, which said that the cause of the riots had been white racist attitudes. And I would have to say, no, that is not a causal explanation. If you're going to pick one cause, it is the refusal of the U.S. ruling class, because this is going to be a class analysis. Notice, always gets you benefits in your analysis. The U.S. ruling class had refused to pay for housing, education, mass transit, healthcare. All the components of modern life had been allowed to decay in places like Harlem and Watts and South Central and the Cabrini Greens of Chicago, and all of those places, and in Newark under Prudential Insurance, very, very direct company town. That I say is the cause. The white racist attitudes are deplorable. They can be either here or there, right? In the police, they're intolerable. Some guy riding in the subway, it becomes less of a cause of social problems. But the real problem is that these communities were kept in poverty. Again, housing, decent health care, education, good schools, mass transit, so you can get out of there and go someplace and commute there and get a job. Okay? So if they say white racist attitudes are the cause, we say no. Why don't you try full employment? Why don't you try 40 million jobs, 10 of which are in a Marshall Plan for which underprivileged ghetto youth and indeed rural youth are eligible. And if 10 million new jobs are not enough at the entry level, then include that. In other words, expand it. I'd get it up to 20 million. It's quite possible. There are things about full employment that we don't know because we haven't seen it for so long. All right. So that is that. So you have a two-pronged thing, right? Federal legislation to restrain police brutality, excessive use of force, killing people in their custody. But even there, you're not going to be able to do the restraining unless you somehow treat the underlying social tensions. So, believe me, economic demands are not irrelevant, right? What was the Martin Luther King March on Washington? It was a march on Washington for jobs, among other things. What was the last thing Martin Luther King was doing? The Memphis garbage men, as they fought for a union and recognition and better wages. And those are sacrosanct demands. And the only long-term solution, the only one, is to rebuild these communities. And that takes Federal Reserve money in particular, but it's also going to take some Treasury money. But in either case, Wall Street pays. That's the other thing. Who created these situations? Don't tell me Joe Sixpack did it. He has no such power. You're not going to do it with some kind of a tax on lower income workers because you think they're somehow responsible. They're not. The ruling class made the decisions, so it's time to go and deal with them. Now, switching gears, we want to take a look at the Chinese-British alliance. And you who frequent this program habitually, this is practically the only place in the world where you get a full-blown alliance, a full-blown analysis of the Sino-British alliance, or better yet, the Anglo-Chinese alliance. Now, I think we're up to date. You can look at the daily briefings to see what happened. Right, Farage jumped ship. He ran away. I think he got what he wanted. Who knows what he wanted? But and also then the infamous Boris Johnson, the blonde-haired pretty boy and banker's boy of the city of London. More and more, it's clear this was a ruling class, top-down, manipulated operation. Lord Blackwell of Lloyd's Bank, Lady Noakes of Royal Bank of Scotland, Sir Henry Angest of Arbuthnot Banking Group, 185 years old, is the claim. So you see all of them. The Queen was very much in favor of it. She told Clegg that she didn't like the European Union, Clegg being the vice prime minister, the Liberal Democrat coalition partner of the Tories and Cameron in the previous government. You can see all that. We wrote that all up. Now, let's begin to look at how this Chinese-British alliance may work itself out in the coming months. Now, again, when we talked about the pro-Trump strategy of tension, we included financial outside events. So think of it also from that point of view. The goal of the British and the Chinese acting together is the destruction of the dollar as a world reserve currency, which in theory, as an abstract proposition, you might say, well, that may have certain merits, but not in the way they're doing it, not by these people, and not with the outcome they propose, because they're not saying we'll essentially phase out the dollar as a reserve currency, and then we can have an equitable world financial system based on negotiation where the ruble, the dollar, the euro, the yen, the Chinese currency, people's dollar or yuan. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be a rational and inclusive process. This is going to be the Chinese ramming it down your throats with the help of their British valets, right? And of course, the embarrassment of the British here is tremendous. Well, just one interesting thing now. You go back to last autumn, maybe late last summer, even, right? Almost a year ago. We were told that the Chinese were beginning to dump U.S. Treasury securities. And there's a complicated argument on this, but the People's Republic of China, as of 2014, reached a peak of holding of U.S. Treasury bills, 4 trillion. And then they had to start selling them in 2014, 2015 because of the stock market crisis stupidly caused by President Xi. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're talking about the Chinese-British alliance, which is the force behind the Brexit. And it is an alliance designed, it is directed against the United States and against the dollar, and not in a good way. It's going to be worse, believe it or not, than it seems to be today, for any number of reasons. The point being, though, that the Chinese got themselves through the stupidity of Xi, right? Xi was going around saying, no more stimulus, no more stimulus. And, of course, that doesn't work. So he had a stock market bubble. He had a real estate bubble. He had all sorts of things going on. And then he said, no more stimulus. And, of course, that then brought the whole damn thing down. It was a little bit like Greenspan coming in 1987. You raise the discount rate 1 full point, pow, you get a panic in your bubbles come down. So at that point, the Chinese began selling treasuries because they needed the money. So at this point, the foreign exchange held by China is now 3.6 trillion. Well, it's still a lot, but you got to imagine what could be done there if they had a way to do it. Right now, of course, you're going to do it. You've got all those treasuries. You can't just dump it because then you'll be wiped out too. Maybe there's some friendly banker who can teach you how to hedge against your own aggressive and destructive policies. The other interesting thing is that in the last couple of years, China has been using Belgium, Brussels, and in particular SocGen, Société Générale Belgique. That has been their agent. They use the Belgian banking system as a kind of an agent. And what could that mean? It looks like the guy who saw this coming and decided to act on it was George Osborne. Now remember, you have the British Prime Minister Cameron, but then he's at number 10 Downing Street. Number 11 Downing Street is the residence of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. We would call that the Secretary of the Treasury or Finance Minister or Treasury Minister. But anyway, it's George Osborne. And it looks to me like he noticed that Belgium was getting a whole lot of commissions and invisible earnings and benefits from serving as the banker for China. Osborne made a key trip to China in October of 2013. And at that point, I think from that we can date what Osborne always calls the golden era. The golden era. It is a golden era of British-Chinese bilateral relations, and they have created a global, comprehensive, strategic partnership. Yes, you heard it. Little England, right? Beneficiary saved by the U.S. twice. Oh, no. That doesn't get you anywhere. Here. Even Medeiros, former senior staff for Asia on Obama's National Security Council, tells the Financial Times, essentially, if you give in to Chinese pressure, it will inevitably lead to more Chinese pressure. Lord Palmerston already stated, Britain has no permanent friends or allies, only permanent interests. So thanks for nothing, USA. You've saved us twice or more, but we're going to join with the Chinese to attack the dollar. So I'm looking for severe squalls. By the way, you may remember that strange film made by Ron Paul when he went to work for a group of stock jobbers, and he told everybody there's going to be a currency crisis, a dollar crisis, right? There's going to be a crisis of the valuation of the dollar. It's not going to come from the stock market. It's going to be something else. I'm wondering, did Ron Paul have a direct line to London? Did some British oligarch tell him that this is coming? Because that's the form it would take. In other words, the elementary thing is Chinese dump U.S. treasuries. Again, that's complicated because you can easily shoot yourself in the foot. So we found an interesting article in The Diplomat by a guy called John Hemmings, and he says that this situation is a very flawed and dangerous policy for the British to go through. Osborne wants to hitch the British wagon to China's rising star. There is part of this that the Chinese are going to build the new nuclear reactors, right? There are 65 nuclear reactors being built around the world, and the British are going to have some of them, but not directly, only through China. So it's like, again, that famous dialectic of master and slave in Hegel. If you don't do the work, you're going to be taken over. More from the diplomat. Unlike Britain, China does not prize the bilateral relationship for short-term economic gains, but rather seeks to use British financial acumen to lift itself into ascendancy. And what is this? The internationalization of the renminbi, using London as a trading hub, and a scheme to link London to the Shanghai stock market. Both of those were announced during Xi's visit to London last October. Xi came to make deals. $48 billion worth of trade and projects put on the table by Xi last October. China has $1.53 trillion in sovereign wealth funds. London would profit immensely from becoming the primary renminbi trade hub, which is a very real possibility, says Thomson Reuters China business desk. The British want to be China's best partner in the West. This essentially means being a satellite in the way that Genoa provided banking services and served as a satellite to the Spanish Empire from about 1575 to 1625. This is me talking. So the diplomat says, watch out. The Osborne Doctrine, meaning sell out to China, suffers from several fatal flaws. First, it is hype built on hype. Several economists view British strategy towards China as over-relying on Chinese investment to sustain growth. Rather than passing the costs of building British infrastructure, such as the 3 nuclear plants, onto China, why not borrow at 3% and maintain control over the nuclear processes, quality control, and maintain the capacity of local industry? Oh, no. Free trade doesn't say that. British are for free trade. So the offshoring is rich in irony. Britain, the home of the Industrial Revolution, is paying China, one of the most recent adherents of the Industrial Revolution, to finance and make British products in Britain, as if to drive home the point. Xi's visit was preceded by the bankruptcy of a leading company in British steel as a result of Chinese steel dumping earlier this year. Now, say what you will about Obama. He's up. We have a 522% emergency tariff against that. And of course, the British have to shut up about civil rights, human rights, and so forth, because she said, if you bring that up, you'll offend me. So the British kowtow. And then this thing about the AIIB, right? The Asian International Infrastructure Bank. The British ran to join it. That's also part of the deal. That is not an unalloyed benefit for singing tomorrows, right? So the Osborne Doctrine has feet of clay. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Got to rush. One last thing about the Osborne Doctrine coming from the diplomat is that this is centered in the Treasury, not the Defense Ministry, not the Foreign Office, not anybody else, not even number 10, Prime Minister, but it's Osborne and the Treasury who are ramming this through. It's like there's been a coup d'etat in the Treasury for this to go on. Okay, so we'll have more about that. Just remember, they're coming, and it may be sooner than you think, right? We're told the U.S. is already practically in recession. Could be true. Watch out for all that stuff. That could go very fast. And, of course, Yellen, I don't know how much Yellen understands. I suspect not too much. Now, We have this terrible situation now. We have Trump and we have Hillary Clinton. So what do you do? And I've been talking about previous examples, right? Franklin D. Roosevelt had to choose between Japan first or Germany first, and he chose Germany first. In February of 1943, 63% of Americans said that Japan was the main enemy. Only 34% said that about Germany. Well, thank goodness for Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, previous example, 1800 contested election. It's for the Federalists who have degenerated. Hamilton is basically frozen out. Adams and Pinckney. And for the Democrats, Democratic Republicans, Jefferson and Aaron Burr, the arch traitor Aaron Burr. So in those days, every elector would cast one vote, actually two votes, and the first coming in would be the president, and the second would be the vice president. But of course, this led to chaos because the first time around, it was for the vote. It was Adams ended up with 65 electoral votes and Pinckney 64 because some Federalists said he could see that there would be chaos. But on the other side, Jefferson and Burr tied with 73 votes. So at that point, the election, according to the Constitution, was thrown into the House of Representatives, which was dominated by Federalists. The Federalist caucus supported Aaron Burr. Hamilton was appalled. He couldn't believe it. However, the Southern Federalists defected, and they preferred Jefferson. So after 35 ballots in the House of Representatives, it finally went for Jefferson. But the reason it did was that Hamilton had thrown his prestige and a tremendous letter-writing campaign into the scales. And I want to point out before we say anything, Hamilton hated Jefferson up to this point, 1801. Hamilton had gotten along fairly well with Burr. He even says, this is a quote from Hamilton, "If there is a man in the world I ought to hate, it is Jefferson. With Burr, I have always been personally okay." Well, as he says, "But the public good must be paramount to every private consideration." So here's Hamilton, and he's got this choice, right? It's a terrible choice. It's a Hobson's choice. It's appalling. And what's he going to do? Should Jefferson be president or Burr? Because those were the ones principally in contention. So already in December of 1801, right after the election and with the Electoral College tied up, he writes, "I hope New England won't lose their heads and fall into the snare of supporting Burr." He says, "Jefferson is infinitely preferable. He is not so dangerous a man. He has pretensions to character. But Burr is a bankrupt beyond redemption, except by the plunder of his country. The only way he can survive is to loot the country. He is the Catiline of America." So Hamilton says, Aaron Burr, no way. He's the Catiline of America. Look that up. That's one of the series of political campaigns of Cicero in the Roman Republic. Hamilton found it incredible that the Federalists not only considered Burr, but a lot of them came out for him. And Hamilton says, "When will men start consulting reason rather than their passions, their hatred? If you elect Burr to mortify the Democrats by the defeat of Jefferson, that's absolutely irresponsible." And he gives examples. "For heaven's sake, let not the Federalist Party be responsible for the elevation of this man Burr." Now, I have to also share with you, I'm reading to you from a pro-Jefferson source here, right? This is Claude Bowers, Hamilton and Jefferson. Claude Bowers is one of the guys who built this whole myth of Hamilton bad and Jefferson good. So Claude Bowers writes, hearing that one friend of his was leaning towards Burr, Hamilton wrote him with almost hysterical earnestness. Hysterical. Well, Hamilton was a statesman, and he had morality, and he knew that once you figured this out, you had to throw all of your weight into the scales and do whatever you could, and don't worry about being balanced. Huh? I hear a lot of this garbage, and look, Hamilton gets it from this pro-Jefferson source, right? What are you? You're going overboard. No, I'm sorry. And the point is not, obviously you can't divide your forces between two projects. Okay. Let's see. Hamilton writes to another guy, Jefferson or Burr? Question mark. The former, without all doubt. And the former means Jefferson, okay? The first one, not the latter, but the former. Gouverneur Morris. Gouverneur Morris, a Federalist who supports Jefferson because it's clear that people were voting for him to be president. Okay, so if there's any man that Hamilton ought to hate, it's Jefferson, but he says the public good, the public interest must be paramount. Hamilton writes that Burr is likely to overthrow the government in order to extend his power. How is it possible that you're thinking of arrangements with a man of Burr's character? Hey, Paul Ryan, you're supposed to be holier than thou. How is it possible that you would make a pact with Trump? And then Hamilton writes on Burr again, no engagement that may be made with him can be depended upon. While making it, he will laugh up his sleeve at the credulity of those with whom he makes it. And in the first moment it suits his views to break it, he will do so. This is Trump's promises to the stupid Republican hacks. Hamilton wants to crush any conspiracy in favor of Burr. He writes, Mr. Burr is the last man in the United States to be supported by the Federalists. Why not seek an understanding with Jefferson? You get all that? Burr is a profligate, a voluptuary. Sound familiar? A profligate and a voluptuary and an extortionist in his profession. Insolvent, bankrupt. Same idea. Bankrupt. In the days of Hamilton, somebody who's gone bankrupt 4 times, that would be a negative. No. And then, who's behind Burr? The Essex junto. These are your New England, they're going to be British East India Company family, right? This is the Boston oligarchy around the Lowell family, the Perkins family, the Higginson family, on and on. So the Essex junto, here's the Essex junto through a guy called Judge Samuel Sewell. He wants a steady and decided vote of the Federalist Party for Mr. Burr, says the Essex junto. Those are the bad guys, okay? Burr should be supported, say the bad guys. The other thing is that Hamilton writes that Burr had urged him to try to pull a coup. Hamilton writes, this interesting confession, he had never said this before, Burr blamed me, Hamilton, for not having used the situation I was in as Treasury Secretary. And Hamilton said that's illegal, and Burr said, great spirits don't care about little moralities. Okay? Doesn't that sound like Trump? Okay? Nothing more foolish than to support Burr. Get it? The new Catalan. And thank God in the end, Jefferson got it, even though he was unfit. See you next week on World Crisis Radio.